Hello, lover. You've just entered a portal of pleasure, power, and deep, unapologetic sensuality. This is Talk Tantra to Me, where we liberate your authentic self, reclaim the wisdom of the body, and let pleasure lead the way. I'm your guide, Leola, tantrika, pleasure priestess, best-selling author of Sacred Sex Ed, and devoted student of the erotic mysteries. I'm here to strip away shame and awaken your most radiant, sacred, and sensual self. Get in, babe. We're conspiring for your most pleasurable life and seducing the world into a greater good. So, take a deep breath with a vocal exhale, relax that delicious body of yours, and let's talk Tantra. If you're a woman who considers herself spiritually awake, deeply devoted, already walking your path with intention, then listen up. I know you've manifested, meditated, sat in ceremony, you know the language of ritual and reverence. And still, you know your pleasure and sensuality hold even more possibility, because erotic embodiment is about moving, speaking, creating, and leading from the deep intelligence of your womb, your heart, and your pussy. The Pleasure Priestess Initiation is an invitation into that next octave. This is a year-long tantric mystery school for women to be initiated into the sacred art of orgasmic leadership, to reclaim your dark feminine gifts, heal the sisterhood wound, and seduce the world into a greater good. This is where we do life and love together online, in ritual, month after month, and of course in the flesh for a juicy in-person immersion. Inside, you'll explore potent Tantra practices that are meant to be lived and adapted to share with your beloved, your sisters, and maybe even with the world through your own offerings, community, and facilitation. You'll be held in a field of high-level support with guest sexperts, medicine women, and embodied leaders who are already walking this path alongside you, as well as 24/7 access to our electric WhatsApp temple to stay connected, supported, and in celebration of this tantric life. The Pleasure Priestess is open for enrollment now to start at the end of April. But as soon as you join, you get access to over 100 hours of previous Tantra trainings, resources, and the vault of our past guest teachers. This is an initiation into your power, into your pleasure, into the woman you know you came here to be. Click the link in the show notes to claim your seat in the temple, or visit us at www.talktantratome.com/pleasure. Hello and welcome to Talk Tantra to Me. It is so delicious to be back here after a 3-month break. The last recording that I did was in the beginning of November 2025, and it is now the beginning of February 2026. So 3 glorious months have passed and so much has happened since then. I am really excited to be back for the next few months. I have some really awesome, epic content planned for you guys. Some really, really incredible guests coming up. I did a little poll on my Instagram asking the audience what episodes they wanted next, what episodes they wanted to hear in this season, if you will. And the number one vote was Conscious Kink for Polarity. So that's not going to be this episode. This episode is going to be kind of my comeback episode. I'm going to tease y'all a little bit longer for Conscious Kink for Polarity with Yosef Sagi, and that will be coming out in 2 weeks. So definitely, if you haven't already, follow the channel, subscribe so that you can get notified when that is out, because it is such a good conversation. It's truly one of my favorites. And Yosef said that to me too during/after the episode. He was like, that's one of the best podcasts I've ever recorded. And then again, sent me a voice note the next day to just reaffirm that. So we loved it. You're going to love it. It's really, really good. So stay tuned for that one. Teasing you. Today, it just felt a little bit better to do a bit more of a life update episode just because so much life has happened and also been created since our winter break, if you will. I'm really enjoying this cadence of taking off a few months in the winter and a few months in the summer. It's so crazy to think that I was, for years, recording one episode every week. So there's tons of other episodes out there if you are new here, but now we are doing every 2 weeks and seasonally, and that feels like a really good pace, especially going into this next season of life. So thanks for being with me on the journey through that evolution. And yeah, so I've, alluded to a lot of just life transition and life changing and life being created. And if the title wasn't obvious enough, I am pregnant, which is really exciting. I'm about 15 weeks pregnant, so newly in the second trimester of pregnancy. And what's really cool is that I was actually pregnant during the last podcast episode that I recorded in the fall, which was called Leola's Favorite Things. And it was literally the day before I found out for sure. Like, I had a really good feeling. I was like, I'm pretty sure that egg was fertilized and there's a little embryo swimming around in there. But you can't have a positive pregnancy test until the implantation happens, until the egg and the sperm meet and then attach to the wall of the uterus. And that's what signals your body to begin to produce HCG, which is the human growth hormone. That is what all pregnancy tests pick up. And generally, you have to wait like 48 hours before it'll show up on a test. And most people don't know that they implanted. I did. I think that everyone's different. Every body is different. I feel for me, I'm pretty sensitive. I'm really tuned into my body. I wasn't expecting to feel it, but I had been pregnant before. For those that aren't aware, I had a miscarriage last year in June, around 7 weeks. And so I had felt the implantation that time too. And the implantation then, it happened during the day. I was conscious, and it felt like the visual that I have of what it felt like is from The Matrix, when the main character, Neo, or is that his name? I don't know. I haven't seen The Matrix in a long time, but he has that little bug tracker thing that's like goes into his skin and like burrows in. It felt like that. That's what implantation felt like the first time. So it happened the first time. I was like, I think that's implantation. And I Googled how long after implantation does it take to have a positive pregnancy test. And it was 48 hours. And just to give people the timeline, I've learned so much about conception and the science, and it's really, really interesting. But essentially, it takes, usually after you have sex and the egg drops and the egg is fertilized, it's usually somewhere between 6 and 10 days before the implantation happens, which is why most women don't find out they don't find out they're pregnant until their missed period, which is 2 weeks after their ovulation, when their egg drops. So that's kind of the timeline there. But with these like really early detection tests, you might be able to find out sooner if your implantation happened, especially, at 6, 7, 8, 9 days. So yeah, that first time my implantation happened at like day 10 or 11. So it was a little bit late in the spread. So that was that. Positive pregnancy test. We were overjoyed. Whatever. Obviously that ended in death. I'm joking about it now because I've done a lot of work around healing it, and I shared quite a bit of that story over in the last season, last July. So if you want to find that one, I think the episode's called Microdosing Motherhood. So anyways, this time the implantation happened at night, and I had just gotten back from a work trip to LA, and it was my first night back in bed, and it felt like when I was conscious the first time it implanted, it just felt like, ooh, okay, like that was a sensation in my womb that I've never felt before. And this time it was like in the middle of the night, so I was a bit lucid. And, you know, in the middle of the night, my belief is that the spirit world and the physical world, that veil kind of thins. And it was just this knowing of I'm implanting right now. And I had these kind of cramps, sort of similar to how I feel before my period starts, where there's just this weightiness, there's just this heaviness, there's just this like aliveness. And again, I had been feeling that for like the days after, like the days after we conceived. So I was already kind of in this place where I think that I'm pregnant, and then it just ramped up. I felt that clarity that night. I felt the soul come in. I felt God's presence. I was like, now I'm like, okay, not only did that embryo get fertilized, now the implantation has happened. I'm pretty certain. So the next morning was too early to take a test, right? They say you need to wait like 48 hours, like wait 2 days, then take a test. That's what like the doctors say. That's what the internet says, whatever. Girl, I mean, your girl is impatient. And I was like, I'm just going to test anyways. I was already testing like every day. And in the TTC community, which stands for trying to conceive, the longer you've been in there, the more you know how freaking neurotic women can be about this stuff. And so I was testing like almost every day anyways with these they're like cheapy test strips. But the beautiful thing about these cheapy test strips is that it can basically, like, you have the two lines, right? And you have the test line, and then you have the control line. And the test line will start to show like the faintest amount of ink if there's a tiny bit of that human growth hormone in your system. So because I implanted the night before, it had only been like 5 hours that my body had a chance to start producing the HCG. So I take the test. I'm not expecting to get a positive. And if anyone objectively looked at my test that morning, they would say, you're not pregnant. But I'm looking at it and I'm like, I can see that I'm pregnant. There's like the very faintest, like crazy lightest little tiny pigmentation that I feel like the naked eye for most people probably couldn't pick up, but I'm squinting, I'm holding it in different light. I'm like doing all the things. And I'm like, yeah, that's a very, 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 very faint line. And I'm pregnant. And I lost my freaking shit that day. I was so excited. I didn't want to tell Andrew yet, my husband, because I wanted the line to get darker. Because if I would have shown him then, it would have been like, he would have been like, I don't know, you know? And I had a very intentional way that I wanted to tell him. So I didn't want to waste the cute, intentional way I was going to tell him with like a look at this negative pregnancy test that's actually positive. So I kept it to myself, but that day happened to be my call day, quote unquote. So I'm very fortunate that I'm fortunate, and also I intentionally built a business where I generally only have meetings 1 day a week. And so on those days, I've got maybe like anywhere between 2 to 5 calls. And I found it so hard to focus on work that day. It was insane. Like between every call, I was on my phone, finding out when the due date would be, like looking at the calendar, thinking about how I was going to tell Andrew. Like I was just in daydream city. And I actually accidentally totally blew off one of my calls, totally forgot about it, which is so unlike me. So anyways, I was just overjoyed, excited. So that's how I found out I was pregnant, and that was in early November. So here we are now, and this episode is going to be an episode about my journey a little bit more with conscious conception, the rituals that we did to open our conception portal, pregnancy, what that's like, my birth plan, how intimacy and sexuality has changed between my husband and I since getting pregnant, how we anticipate that to evolve after we have the baby, and just a general life update as well. And I want to acknowledge that many of my listeners are not women, so they will never become mothers, and this might be totally unrelatable and not for you. And also many, even, women that are listening in won't become mothers or parents because they just don't choose to do that in this lifetime. And I just want to acknowledge all good if this episode's not for you. This isn't going to become the motherhood / birth podcast. At least that's not my plan. If I were to do that, there would probably be a whole rebrand. But for now, I also want to acknowledge that there may still be some nuggets for you to glean in seeing my journey through this. Because to me, becoming a mother in many ways feels like the ultimate tantric initiation. And this is an episode where we're going to be, talking about things like ego and identity dissolution, uncovering your deepest desires, finding God in your body, trusting the divine. Like all of these spiritual tantric principles are deeply, deeply applicable. What am I trying to say? Applicable. Are deeply applicable to living a tantric life, which I do feel that if you're listening to this, you're on that journey. So maybe there's still something here for you. At the end of the day, you also came into this world through birth, right? And through sacred sexuality, this energy. And I have also found that even if you're not planning to become a mother or a parent in this lifetime or go through this particular initiation, there's lots to be harvested from hearing about the intentional ways of doing it versus thinking about how you were brought into the world. Because a lot of the birth industry is really unintentional and has been very overly medicalized. It's been turned into like an emergency rather than this really beautiful, sacred experience. And to give a little context, a few years ago, I did this kind of shamanic experience where I went into collective grief, and this wasn't a prompt. This was just where I happened to go with it and where God took me on the shamanic journey. But I had this deep, deep well of grief come up for processing how so many souls come into this world, and it's very traumatic. Like they're immediately, born into this like bright fluorescent light, and then they're patted really hard to get them breathing and get them going. Their umbilical cord is cut immediately, unnecessarily. They're like, poked and prodded to make sure that everything's okay before they're given to the mother. And a lot of that's changing now, but, yeah, it's like there could be some grief potentially for you around processing. How did you come into this world? Was it really loving? Were you, and that's a whole other conversation, is were you a child who was intentionally brought into the world from love, etc.? So there's lots to be gleaned from this in just your own personal thought process. I do believe that every baby has their own plan, their own soul contract for how they're meant to come into the world. So this isn't to say that hospital births are bad, interventions are bad, C-sections are bad. Like that could happen for me, and that's okay. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when I talk about my birth plan in a moment. Because again, I think that, before we come into this life, there is this, negotiation with our higher self, with God around like, what are the experiences that I'm choosing to have in this life as a soul for my soul development, right? And that includes how we come into the world, right? So all that to say, thank you for being here. Deeply tantric subjects, and it's going to be just a fun little combo. But I think that the biggest thing that I want to highlight is that, again, becoming a mother, following this path has been the biggest death, the biggest evolution of my identity that I have experienced in my life. And I haven't even had the child yet. This has been a really big theme for me. I talked a lot about it last year because it really started last year. Last year was the year that we decided to begin trying. And pretty much as soon as that decision was made, there were just so many shifts, and it was deeply painful in many ways to go through the ego death that came along with that. I have this kind of phrase that I like to say, and it's, a tantrika's death begins the moment she clings too tightly to any one identity. And that's just something to hold on to think about on your own journey is where am I holding on to an identity that's no longer serving me and is actually taking me further from the path? Because what I love about Tantra is that it is this path of expansion and liberation. And so much of this journey is acknowledging that there is no good, bad, right, wrong way of being. It's really about what path, what ways of being, what actions, what challenges in this season of life support my expansion and liberation. And what supports my expansion and liberation in this season is very different than what it used to be. But we can get really attached to this is who I am, and that can actually take us further away from the godliness that we're meant to step into because we're just clinging too tightly to what once expanded and liberated us, right? So I've talked about that a lot in other episodes. I don't want to go too deeply into it because there's so much I want to talk about today and we're already almost 20 minutes in and I'm like, oh crap, I've got to speed this up. So, just my identity has shifted so majorly. My discernment's at an all-time high. My values are massively shifting. The things that I used to enjoy doing, I don't enjoy anymore. It's just crazy. And there will be more of that on the podcast, but for now, much of what I'm going to share today is here because you guys requested it. So again, I had the poll about which podcast I should do first. Conscious Kink for Polarity won, but this was the second choice. And so after that, I opened, a box for questions on my podcast on my Instagram for you guys to ask questions about my conception journey, pregnancy, marriage, birth plans, other life updates. So a lot of what I'm sharing is what you guys wanted to know. So let's go through the questions. The first question is, when did you know you wanted to have kids and when did you know you were ready? I really love this question. I also had one of my girlfriends, IRL, ask this question because she was feeling kind of actually similarly to how I felt a few years ago, which was not ready to have kids. And I think that that's a big thing. People say you're never going to feel ready. That isn't the case for me. However, I didn't think that I would ever feel ready. And at the end of the day, can you ever really be ready? I don't know. But so for me, I always knew I wanted to be a mom. When I was a little girl, I loved playing with dolls. I absolutely loved it. I will say that I was very set on adopting before I went through puberty. I did not want to have biological children. I just felt like as a child, as a kid, 12 and under, that maybe 13 or under, maybe this shifted when I was 13 or 14. But when I was a kid, I just felt like there's so many children in the world that don't have a home. I don't need to have children. I don't need to have biological children. I also was my understanding of birth is that it's very painful. So there's 2 points of resistance there. One, it feels better to adopt for the betterment of the world. And 2, birth is painful. So I'd rather avoid that entirely. And so that was my plan, was to adopt. Now, when I went through puberty and my womb came online and I started to have my bleed, I began to tune into the sacred gift and initiation and beauty that was in my womb. And there very urgently, I felt this shift of, oh no, I want to be a mom and I want to birth a baby and I want to grow it in my body. This is a miracle. This is magical. I absolutely want to do that. So then my plan for a long time was I'm going to have one and I'm going to adopt one, which is still something that I would like to do. So we will see. We will see. I've looked into the adoption process and it's actually not as easy as one might think. And actually a lot of places to adopt from have weird specifications. You need to have fertility issues or you need to be a gay couple that can't biologically adopt. That was one agency that I went through that my friend recommended who had adopted a child from. So I'm sure that that's not always the case, etc. But yeah, we'll see when we get to that point. Another thing that I feel really passionate about is actually fostering as well. So that's something that could happen too down the line when after Andrew and I have kids that are in high school or college. So I know that I'm meant to be a mom, not just for my kids, but for others as well. And in many ways, I get to take on that mothering archetype outside of my own family already, but we'll see. I'm not attached to what it looks like. So I always knew I wanted to be a mom. Now, I really, though, felt for a long time, I'm not ready, and I don't think I'm ever going to be ready. When I moved to Austin, I was surrounded by friends, girlfriends, who were dying to become moms. They could not wait to meet their man and have babies. And I was like, I'm good. Like, I'm good. Like they were like, I want to be pregnant yesterday. And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. Like it could be in 5 years. It could be in 10 years. Like I'm really unattached. And I truly didn't feel like I was ever going to be really ready. And I think a lot of that came from a deep fear of FOMO. Like, what am I love my business. I love my ability to travel. I love my freedom. I love my slow mornings. Like, I just was so attached to what was really working in my life that I really struggled with totally, fully embracing motherhood because I knew how much motherhood would shift those things. And I just honestly wasn't ready for those things to shift. So that was a whole thing. When I met Andrew, he was ready. He was like, I want to get you pregnant now. And so I told him, I would be ready in like 3 to 5 years, probably closer to 5 years, but we'll see. And he was like, okay, we'll do 3 years. And I was like, all right, we'll see. So that was now 4 years ago, almost 4 years ago. So we ended up landing like about at the about right in the middle, actually. So we started trying at about 3 years. And we're going to end up having the baby at like almost exactly 4 years. So he was ready. I wasn't. And again, I have the man. This is the father of my children. I've talked about this on the podcast before. The very first time I saw Andrew in person, which was at one of my Tantra events, he walked in the door and I had this voice speak into my brain. This is the father of your children. Okay. I had never gotten that before. And you know, I have other stories that tell about our whole love story and how we got to the place of falling in love and marrying and all of the things. But yeah, so I knew he was the father of my children, but I wasn't ready. And as we got deeper into our relationship, I had a list of things that I wanted to accomplish individually and as a couple before we crossed that threshold. And continuously, Andrew was like, and I'll tell you those things. I wanted to have a wedding. I wanted to buy a house. I wanted to launch my book, Sacred Sex Ed, and I wanted to get LASIK. So those were the 4 main things. And Andrew was like, we don't need to buy a house to have a baby. We don't need to have a wedding to have a baby. And I was like, no, I want to feel beautiful in my wedding dress. I want to be able to have a glass of champagne at my wedding. I don't want to be pregnant. I want to like be able to like really rest into our home, blah, blah, blah. So anyways, we did those things. All of those things ended up wrapping up at the end of 2024. In 2024, we actually bought our house at the end of 2023. We had our wedding at the end of 2024. I got LASIK in October of 2024, and I launched my book in the summer of 2024. So at the beginning of 2025, I was like, I'm looking good. Like I got all of my shit done. And at the same time, like, very quickly after that, things began to shift because I also was like, it was a slow burn that I went from, don't know if I'm ever going to be ready to, wait a second, I think I'm actually ready. Now, what was also going on in 2024 is Andrew had a pretty major mental health crisis that really rocked the foundation of our relationship, which was incredibly challenging the year that we're getting married, the year that I'm having the biggest growth year in my business. I'm launching this book. It was insane. It was one of the most beautiful years of my life, but it was also so fucking hard. And part of that mental health crisis was like, okay, you also really get super stable before we bring a child into the world. So I think that's when things started to reverse for Andrew. So I started to be like, I'm feeling ready. And he started to be like, I actually need to deeply fall in love with myself. And that's a whole other podcast. We've talked about it a bit on the podcast. He's going to come back on the podcast soon. And I'm really excited for him to share more about the journey that he's been on and how that relates to the tantric journey. But all that to be said, we kind of started to flip-flop. But early 2025, things begin to shift even more. And actually, I think it was 2024 that things started to shift, because there were a few moments that I want to just highlight where I started to really think differently about having kids and what it actually represented to me. And the first one was going to a strip club. And I actually think that this happened in 2024, maybe in like mid 2024. And Andrew and I would do this thing where maybe every like 3 to 6 months, we would get together with a group of our friends and we would go to a strip club in Austin, Texas. And it was just like such a fun adventure to be in that energy of sensuality and taboo and money, and just bring light and love into this temple that's kind of been disgraced in some ways. And we love the strip club. That's also a whole other podcast episode. And there's so much to learn there. It's like human science and sexuality science. But I remember we decided to go. We were like in the hot tub. It was a Friday night. We didn't have any plans, which was rare for us. And I was like, I want to go on an adventure tonight. Do you want to go to the strip club? And he was like, yeah. So we texted a few of our friends, and spontaneously a group of like 6 or 7 of us met at the strip club. The next morning I was in the shower and I was like, yeah, last night was fun, but it was all right. Like, it was one of those moments where I felt, been there, done that, still fun, but the next big adventure isn't that. The next big adventure feels like having children. It feels like challenging. It feels dynamic. Like that. Having kids basically started to sound more fun than the strip club. Having kids started to sound more fun than the life that I was living, that I had been so afraid of letting go for years. So that's one little taste of the shift happening. Then in early 2025, I had a retreat. So this was about a year ago. I had a retreat in Austin, Texas, and it was incredible. It was beautiful. It was powerful, but it was also like really hard. Like, I just had this major shift, and I came out the other side being like, this is great. This is making major change in the world, but I kind of want to do something different. I want to make a different type of change. I really want to shift my energy. Like, I'm giving so much of myself to the world, to my business, and I'm starting to feel this retraction and this pull of my energy into my home and into my family. It was like this really almost like painful, like unfurling. I don't know how to describe it. Energetically and emotionally painful, but it was also really beautiful. So that's when I told Andrew. I think that was at the end of February 2025. So again, about a year ago. And I told Andrew, I think I'm ready. Like, I think I'm ready to have kids. And he was like, okay, let's talk about it. Because we had planned to start trying this in the summer of 2025. And actually we didn't even plan to start trying. We had planned to reassess in the summer. And we weren't there yet. But I was feeling the pull. Then in March, this was another big moment. In March, I went to LA and I had an event in LA. And this was one of those things that I was deeply afraid of losing. I loved the reality that I had the freedom at any time to plan a trip to LA, plan an event there, jet off, not have to really check with anyone, not have to worry about making plans for a baby, and I could just go and do my event and have a great time in LA. I got to LA, I did my event, and I was like, this is fine, but I actually wouldn't mind giving this up for a few years if it came to it. Like, yes, of course, I can arrange childcare to go and do an event or to travel or whatever, but it's just not as easy as just dropping everything and doing that whenever I want. And it's also an opportunity cost kind of, it's a different opportunity cost ratio that you get to play with in that dynamic. So anyways, I was like, yeah, I actually think I'm really ready. Like, the things that I was most afraid of missing out on, I actually feel really fine missing out on. And now it feels more of a cost to miss out on these years of my life to create life and to be a mother. So those were the big shifts for me. Those were the big moments where things shifted. And so that's when I really knew. So that was at the end of March that I went to LA. And then we talked about April. April, we went on our honeymoon. So we went on a 2-week trip to Miami for a workshop, and then we went to Europe. And I brought all of the things that I might want to utilize for a conscious conception ritual to Europe, even though Andrew and I hadn't agreed yet that we were going to open the portal, but we knew that we wanted to open the portal for this spirit in a really intentional, high vibe way. But Andrew wasn't convinced yet. I was like, I'm ready. He was like, I don't know yet. What ended up happening is he did his own process of talking to God about it. And God was like, no, you should start trying. So that's what we did. And we opened the portal on our honeymoon in Europe. There were lots of things that we did. I brought like different spiritual tools. I brought yarrow, which is a herb that connects you to your ancestors. I brought some rose quartz to offer. I brought like so many like little bits and bobs and beautiful things. I brought things that represented the baby. I created a whole altar for us. We had this whole like moment where we spoke into, we spoke to the spirit. Here's why we feel we're ready for you. This is our vision for parenthood. This is the type of life we want to create for you. And we just open this like really sacred ritual space to speak to the baby and to also call forth our ancestors to support us in guiding this soul to us. It was really beautiful. We obviously had sex that night, but it was also one of those things that we went into it saying, we're going to like soft try. Like we weren't going to be really serious about timing conception sex and like getting really stressed out about we need to have sex like a bunch of times to increase the chances. We decided to go into it not like we're trying but not trying, but yeah, just not as like intensely like we are making a baby. And we decided to do that for 3 months because of my work schedule. I didn't want to be in the first trimester during my busy season in the fall where I had a couple back-to-back retreats and a Pleasure Priestess launch and just a bunch of things going on. So we would try for 3 months. That would make it so that I would be in my second trimester during that period. And then we would pause. So April, we were very chill about it. In May, we were more serious about let's make this happen. And we did conceive in May, which was great. Other things that I did around conceiving, I started singing. I started singing to the baby every day. So we had known her name for years. We had talked about her for years. Obviously, we could have had a boy and that would have been fine, but we felt very strongly this girl spirit in our field. So I would sing her name. I made up a little song that had her name and her nickname in it, and I sang to her almost every day with my drum. I also did different meditations. There's this book called Spirit Babies. It's such a good book. I don't remember the author right now, but I do highly recommend it. Even if you don't have kids or want to have kids, it's just a really sweet book about spirit babies. And inside the book, there are different like chants and meditations that you can do to like connect or to call in your spirit baby or to open the conception cradle is what they call it. So I was doing that. Yeah, it was beautiful. So that was a little bit about how we opened the conception and the regular ritual that I had around conceiving. So next question. I'd love to know how you prepared your body for pregnancy and for birth. I will say like this is like honestly, it could be a whole other episode because there's just so many things. And it was really a multi-year journey on all fronts, physically, emotionally, spiritually, professionally. And I'll talk a little bit more about how I'm preparing my business for birth as well later. But health-wise, when Andrew and I got together, I knew, okay, like we are going to be on that track sooner rather than later. So I want to get everything checked out. So maybe about 2 years ago, I got my blood work done, checked everything. Everything actually looked really good. I was a little worried about my hormones, but everything looked perfect. So that was great. But there were still some things that weren't totally working at like, what am I trying to say? Working at their top functioning. I had things like chronic pain in my back. I have scoliosis. I had some digestive and gut health going on that like, it wasn't like I had pain or anything crazy. I was just like, I feel like this could be better. There was like womb care, reproductive health stuff. So I worked very seriously with a medical intuitive that I hired. My therapist actually recommended him. He is kind of cuckoo. I don't really want to go too into it, but it was truly life-changing. He works in a very energetic way. I've never seen him in person. I've never even seen his face. It's all over the phone. But he basically, he did so many incredible things for me. He had me on some detoxes. He did some like remote emotional clearing on me. He did like remote chiropractic. He also had me on different supplement protocols, and truly, my health changed very drastically from that. I also started going to the chiropractor for a while in person too, to really work on this back pain that I was having, that would kind of come and go. But what ended up working was actually more of a mindset and strength approach. So I read this book called The Way Out. If you have chronic pain of any kind, I highly recommend it. Long story short, I basically realized that I was making my pain a million times worse by being a type A person that was trying to fix it really hard. And once I just relaxed about it, things got a lot better. The book explains it, The Way Out. Highly recommend. There's also a podcast on it as well. I don't know if the podcast is called The Way Out, but if you did a little research, you could probably find it. I started listening to the podcast first before I invested in the book. So you might want to do that. Another big thing was doing Pilates. Pilates is really great for imbalances in the body that are muscular, or I don't know. I'm not a scientist, nor am I like a super professional body care worker, but Pilates was also really helpful for me. And that's another thing that I started doing, a couple years ago, was I started being much more serious about working out and getting strong, and finding a workout that was actually sustainable, that I enjoyed doing. And I will just plug here, Studio Ash Pilates has been life-changing for me. It's at home. Her classes, most of them are like between 15 and 30 minutes. And she has, not only does she have just like, it's all mat Pilates, but she has, things for just anyone, but she also has Pilates for postpartum, Pilates for pregnancy. And so I felt this is a woman that I can actually really grow with through my next season. And the beautiful thing is that we're actually pregnant together. She already has 2 kids, but we're like a couple weeks apart. But anyways, I really love her. It's like $50 a month. So it's actually cheaper than a lot of gym memberships. Actually, I think it's less than that. I think it's like 33. I actually don't know. But Studio Ash Pilates, I love her. She's great. I will say that working with my nervous system was actually the biggest difference, or the biggest life changer for preparing for pregnancy and preparing for motherhood, because being a mother and having that much change is deeply dysregulating for the nervous system and is really hard for a lot of individuals. So I started doing a lot of work around my nervous system like 4 or 5 years ago. And that just ramped up. 2 years ago, I did a training for work that is kind of like a trauma-informed nervous system training. And I did it because this would be great for like being a Tantra facilitator, but I also did it because I also am preparing myself for the reality that I'm going to have little me's and little Andrews running around the house that are learning how to manage their emotions and learning how to regulate their nervous system. And I want more tools to be able to track their nervous systems and be able to support them. And that was really powerful. And that training was The Phoenix Path by Jessica Binstock. I've mentioned it on here before, but I just want to give her credit. So I also started taking prenatals before we even started trying. I started taking prenatals in 2025 because I knew, so a year ago, I knew that we were going to start trying that year. I also knew we're probably not going to start trying until like July. That was like our original plan, was to like wait until the summer to assess. But I wanted to just like, I do definitely recommend, as soon as you think that you might want to start trying getting pregnant, start taking your prenatals, because pregnancy is so depleting on the body. It sucks so many nutrients out. So you really want to go into it feeling very nourished and really healthy, and just having all of those things that the baby needs already built up in your system. So I really recommend taking them. And also they're just really good for you. Like, I noticed once I started taking my prenatals that everything in my system just started working better anyways. So highly recommend taking those. I take the brand Needed, Needed. They're not sponsoring this. I don't get any kickback. I just researched which ones had all of the things that you need and came from the best sources, and Needed was the best one. The only thing that I will say is it's 8 capsules a day. And I know that a lot of people Don't like that, can't handle it. It doesn't bother me. I don't mind taking pills. I don't love it, but to me, I'm like, this is a small concession. So yeah, I started taking prenatals months before we started trying. I've been reading a lot. I had read a lot, again, years before, like 5 years before, like now, years before I met Andrew, I was already reading about motherhood and birth because, first of all, I knew it was something I wanted to do. And second of all, I had a lot of clients that were pregnant or mothers, and I just wanted to understand what they were going through more to support them, because I knew that the tools I had in Tantra could be really life-changing, but I just wanted to understand more of what they were experiencing and going through. So that's been a huge, huge piece, especially getting to know as well the physiological process of birth and the physiological processes of pregnancy. Because that's another thing that I was like kind of scared of birth, which I'll talk about a bit more in a moment. But every woman has a pleasure superpower. Do you know yours? If not, I created the free Pleasure Power quiz to help you discover your unique pleasure archetype so you can maximize what comes naturally to you, deepen your confidence in your desires, and embody your pleasure with the most ease and power. When you take the quiz, you'll also receive a free Tantra ritual tailored to your unique archetype. This is designed to help you embody this aspect of yourself and not just understand it intellectually. Also, don't miss the free Sexual Shadow Work Workbook, your guide to clearing shame, activating your turn-on, and stepping into your most radiant embodied self. Find them both at www.talktantratome.com/free or get the link in the show notes. Life is about to get so very juicy. The number one book that I read for preparing for pregnancy is called Expecting Better. So you probably have heard of What to Expect When Expecting, which is this old school pregnancy book. Expecting Better is like the rebuttal. It's like the modern rebuttal based on science of all of the things that relate to pregnancy, including diet, coffee, like the things that you can and can't have, but like what's really true, as well as like testing, like various testing, like should you do an NIPT? Should you get this tested? Should you get this test? And it really lays out like all of the information. One big thing, just to give you a little taste of it, is when you're pregnant, they say that you can't eat like so many fucking things. And this book really like goes through each thing and actually talks about the risks. So for example, something like sushi, she's like, actually, the main concern with a lot of the foods that they say not to eat is listeria, which is this particular bacteria that is detrimental to a fetus. And actually, you can't really get you don't really get listeria from sushi or from like most deli meats, which are the things that they tell you not to eat. There's actually more listeria outbreaks in lettuce, and no one's telling you when you're pregnant not to eat lettuce, right? So she just like debunks a lot of stuff and really talks about what the actual risks are. And I loved it, and it made me feel much more empowered going through pregnancy, especially in the first trimester where you already are struggling to like eat and get food down. And it's like, now I've got all these parameters around what's okay and what's not. And to have a more science-based approach to what I should and shouldn't eat was really supportive to me. And it made me feel really good. So all kinds of things. And then also, so just to continue on the subject, how did you prepare? So for pregnancy and birth, relationally is another really big area where we did a lot of prep work around pregnancy and birth. And I'll just say that in 2024, which as I already said, that was like my really hard year. At the beginning of the year, I knew this is probably going to be my last baby-free, pregnancy-free year. So God, I like literally did like a ritual and I prayed to God, show me what needs to be healed for myself and for my husband, and also in our relationship to have kids. Like I specifically was like, bring it, like bring everything to the light, bring it out in the open. Let's fix it now before we open that conception portal. And guess what? That ended up being the year where there were so many breakthroughs, so many initiations, so many legitimately tough times. But I'm really happy that I put that out there and that all of those things got kind of cleared and fell into place, because I can really confidently say that we're going into parenthood as prepared, as whole, and as in love as we possibly could be. So that journey is going to look different for everyone, but that's kind of the ritual, the intention that I put out to the universe, was specifically asking for that healing. So that's that. How did you tell Andrew you were pregnant? This is sweet. So the very first time I found out I was pregnant, I kind of like, he went out for a run and I set up some balloons and my pregnancy test and a little like stuffed animal and some dad books, so that when he came home, it was like out on the table. And it was really sweet. You only get to tell your husband that you're pregnant for the first time one time. And honestly, I cherish that moment so deeply, even though that pregnancy ended in loss. And what I wish wasn't true is that the fact that we had a miscarriage with our first pregnancy, it really cast a shadow on the second pregnancy. Although, as I mentioned, I was super excited, so excited that I was accidentally blowing off work calls. It was also one of those situations when I did tell Andrew I was pregnant that we were both just not as emotive. We were both a little cautious in our responses, because we were like, okay, well, we'll see. Like, we don't know what this pregnancy is going to bring. So I just want to keep that very real for anyone that has gone through that. And it was also really sweet, but I was very much in the energy of, I need to one up the last time. I need to make this time I tell Andrew even better, so that there is something that feels, I don't know, to me it felt like this, I need to make up for what happened, or I want to make up for what happened, or I want this to be special in its own way, really is what it was about. And so what was really beautiful is that I did something really unique that I don't think that anyone could just do. It was very specific to Andrew. And I have to kind of tell a backstory for this. So when Andrew and I first met 4 years ago, his dad had just died. And he and his dad were so close, so close. And it was a deeply painful period for him. And one of his close friends has this company called Eternova. And what Eternova does is they take the ashes or the hair or the clothing, some carbon heavy object of the deceased person, and has those ashes turned into a diamond. So that's what Andrew did. Andrew had his dad turned into a beautiful blue diamond. Now, we got this diamond back years ago. And it just sat in its little cushion. Like, it wasn't set in a piece of jewelry or anything in particular. So it sat in this drawer for years. And I kept saying, we need to do something with the diamond. We need to do something with the diamond. But it also wasn't my dad. Like, he gets to do that in his own time, whatever. But it got to this point where it was like years. And I asked him, can I just do something with this and surprise you with it? And he said, sure. And I did give him like a few options and I got some ideas. And then he's like, yeah, I trust you, go for it. But it's a multi-month process to get everything all set up. But what I wanted to do was basically what I did was I got it all set. I got it all beautiful in this incredible pendant necklace. And it was just perfect timing, because originally, okay, so I feel like there's just so many details that I want to share with you guys. I don't want to leave anything out. But we miscarried. I'm just backtracking. We conceived in May, miscarried in June, tried again in July. Then we decided to pause trying to conceive in August. And then we started trying again September. And then we started trying again like at the end of September / early October. Like, I tended to ovulate at the very end of the month. So I could have found out I was pregnant in October, in like early to mid-October. And I thought we're going to try again and we're going to get pregnant immediately. That didn't happen. And I was really bummed. Like, I was super bummed when I found out I wasn't pregnant in October. But it actually ended up really good, because the pendant ended up taking longer than I thought and it wasn't ready. So if I would have found out I was pregnant in October, I would have had to find a new way to tell him. What ended up happening was the pendant arrived the day that I got back from LA, the day that I implanted, the day before I confirmed that I was pregnant. So it was like perfect timing. It arrived in the mail. It was gorgeous. It was beautiful. So yeah, I was able to basically say, I have a surprise for you. Here's your dad. And by the way, you're going to be a dad again. And it was really sweet. So that is how I told Andrew. What's it like to be pregnant? Someone asked. Being pregnant is like microdosing on mushrooms 24/7. It's like this light high all the time. And also, for me at least, when I'm on most medicines, I also have some tummy troubles and I can also feel a bit nauseous, which is interesting because I also have that in pregnancy. But another way I would describe pregnancy is it's like having this little miracle growing inside of you, but the miracle is also a parasite. And I'm like half joking, but like it's kind of like that because they really are like sucking and taking the nutrients and making you ill and all of that. And at the end of the day, like it's also a miracle and I'm very grateful, but that's been my experience with pregnancy. My first trimester was pretty rough. You know, speaking of, you know, someone had asked, how did you prepare for pregnancy? I feel like I did way more than most people. I was very intentional about it. I think that I could have done more to prepare. You could always do more, but I felt pretty prepared going in. And I still felt very ill the first trimester. I will say that there's like this new wave of pregnancy influencers / teachers that are basically saying that if you're sick or if you have pregnancy symptoms, there's something wrong with you. There's something that you're undernourished on or that you're depleted on. And like, I just can't imagine that being true because as I had mentioned, like I did all of this prep work. I was taking all of these supplements months and months leading up to it so that I would go in as nourished as possible. I was eating insanely well. Like I just don't believe that at this point. But I went in naively thinking, oh, I'm probably not going to get that sick because I'm so healthy and I've been taking such good care. No, I got pretty ill. What I ended up learning is that it's actually 80% genetic. So whatever your pregnancy symptoms are, 80% of them are actually going to come from genetics and from mostly your mom. And so what I would recommend doing if you're planning on getting pregnant, and if it's possible for you, talk to your mom about her experience with pregnancy, which I did after I got pregnant. And I learned that she was like violently ill to the point that she was losing weight during pregnancy. She really struggled to put on any weight the entire pregnancy. She was vomiting every day. She was put on bed rest because she just was so unwell. Thankfully, that was not my experience, but if I would have known that, it might have set me up for like a little bit more of a sober reality because I was very ill, especially in that first trimester. But I'm saying this, like, don't be fooled. Don't feel bad if you have symptoms. You know, every single woman I know has had symptoms in some way, shape, or form. And I know one woman that, like, there are women that don't get sick during their first trimester that feel pretty good. But, you know, one of those women, I have one friend that has boys and she wasn't sick during her pregnancies, but she had major swelling in her body. She went up 2 shoe sizes during each pregnancy and her feet didn't go back to their normal size afterwards. I think that she said now she's still a full size up in her shoe size, compared to pre-pregnancies. So you'll have different things. And that also happened to her mom, which again, just reinforces this reality that a lot of it is genetic. So just keep that in mind. You know, I've also heard that girls, if you're pregnant with a girl, you tend to be more ill. So also something to think about. I'm having a girl. That's it. Now, I'm in my second trimester now. I have started feeling a lot better. I started to get a lot more energy. Okay, so just to like share a little bit more of what it feels like, because no one really shared this with me. Like I knew that people, like I had friends that said like, hey, make sure that you don't plan anything crazy in your first trimester. Just be mindful of that. But they didn't really tell me what it was going to be like. So I'm going to share what it was like for me. It's not like this for everyone. Everyone has a different journey. But for me, it kind of felt like I was recovering from a stomach flu for like 2 months straight. It wasn't like I was like in the stomach flu for 2 months straight. There were days that it felt like that. But it was like I was operating at like 50 to 80% most days. So keep that in mind. Like, how frustrating is it when you've been like very ill and you just like can't get better? It's kind of like that. Some days it felt like I was like severely hungover or mildly hungover, some range of hungover, even though I obviously wasn't drinking anything. That's another way that I would describe it. But I would say that for me, it kicked up around 5.5 weeks. It was full force by 6 weeks. And then from weeks 6 through 10, it was pretty intense. I would say the fatigue started to get way better at like week 9, or maybe it started to get better at week 9. And by week 10, 11, like the fatigue was gone, but I was still feeling very nauseous. Now, and I mean, when I say fatigue, I was sleeping 12 hours a night and then taking a 2 or 3 hour nap in the middle of the day. Like, it was insane. Now I'm sleeping like 8 to 9 hours a night, sometimes 10 hours a night. I don't take any naps. So that's where I'm at now. I still, in my second trimester, I'm early on. As I mentioned, I'm about 15 weeks. I still am dry heaving when I open up the fridge. And like if I smell something weird, I still hate it when Andrew cooks meat in the house. It absolutely disgusts me. So there are still things, lots of aversions. I thought that eating during pregnancy would be fun. I was under the impression that I was going to have all these cool cravings and food would just like hit so fucking hard. Not for me. I'm like struggling to find something palatable. So again, that could change and it's gotten slightly better, but that's still kind of the case that I'm just like eating for survival basically. So I've also been eating so much dairy, so much yogurt and milk, not the norm for me, and lots of fruit, but I always eat lots of fruit. So, and I will also say that while those women that I mentioned had said, you know, if you're not like, your nourishment is so important, you're having symptoms because you're not nourished. And I was like, I don't fully buy that. I also do buy, I will say that nourishment is so key, because on the days where I was kind of slacking on my protein or not eating every 90 minutes, my symptoms got a million times worse. So while my symptoms never went away, they did get way worse when I wasn't nourishing myself well. So know that too. Yeah, so that's what it's like to be pregnant. And it's also just like, it's incredible in so many ways. Like, I think that, and I'm about to go into relationally and intimacy. That's like one way that it's been really beautiful, is how the dynamic between Andrew and I has changed in such a sweet way. So another question that was asked multiple times was about sex during pregnancy. What's changed for us in sex during pregnancy? And I want to make this a little bit more broad and more inclusive to talk about just like intimacy in general, because I would say our intimacy and our sexual connection is at an all-time high, but our penetrative sex is at like a low. So first of all, during trimester 1, I felt like I was recovering from a stomach flu. So think about how you feel during that time. Think about if you would want to be having really engaged sex, and let me know, you know, what your answer is. But for me, I like didn't initiate really almost at all during my first trimester, which is rare for me. I actually tend to be the one that initiates sex more in our relationship. So that was a big difference. We still had sex, but it just was way less. Way less. Another thing that I've heard, though, is that if you're having a girl, your sex drive tends to go down. But if you're having a boy, your sex drive tends to go up, because when you're having a boy, your body is producing more testosterone, and that testosterone makes you horny. So that's just another thing. I'm having a girl, so I can't speak to that. One immense benefit of intimacy during pregnancy is that I feel so much more. I've always been a more energetic and sensual kind of erotic blueprint, but it has just been 10x. Like, when you are pregnant, all of your senses kind of get enhanced. And that really applies for intimacy as well, in beautiful and not so beautiful ways. For example, like if Andrew has bad breath, like before that was like, whatever, it's not a big deal. Now it's like, if you have bad breath, I'm going to like vomit in your face. So that's a big deal. But kissing, oh my God. Kissing got me through my first trimester. It was like one of those things where I felt so ill and so bad in my body. But if Andrew would just like lovingly make out with me for a minute, the world disappeared and I just felt like I was on MDMA. So that's been incredible. Another thing that's been really beautiful is the shadow work that's come up for both of us, particularly me. We did a really beautiful yoni massage de-armoring session. It kind of happened spontaneously. We were gonna have sex and it just really shifted into another direction, and he did a yoni massage on me. I have a whole episode of my podcast about yoni de-armoring, so tune into that for more. But yeah, I don't know, like to me, our intimacy and sex is even more like a plant medicine journey. We just go really deep and we have this really restorative, healing, transformational type of connection. So yeah, lots of shadow work's been happening. Another thing that we've been doing since the new year, so since I was about like 9 or 10 weeks pregnant, we do this game called the 3-minute game. I'm going to briefly explain it. This is good for all couples to do. And I think it's an especially powerful tool if you have kids or if you're going through a season where you feel under-resourced and you just don't have as much time for intimacy, or like you don't feel like you have the energy for it. Because this game, while it's called the 3-minute game, it actually takes closer to 15 minutes because there's 4 rounds of 3 minutes. So 4 rounds times 3 minutes, that's about 12 minutes. But then there's kind of some like lag time in between each round. So it's about 15 minutes. And, you know, like say you don't have time for sex, intimacy with your partner, you can make time for 15 minutes. And especially when it's something as juicy as the 3-minute game, because what I love about the 3-minute game is that okay, I'm going to explain it. And then I'll explain why it's so good for this. But basically, there are 2 rounds where the question asked is, what do you want to receive from me for the next 3 minutes? So each person gets to receive some type of connection that would really feel juicy, connective, nourishing, or therapeutic for them. And it doesn't have to be sexual. So most of the time when Andrew and I are requesting what we would like for 3 minutes, it's a foot massage, it's a back massage, it's to be scratched on our scalp, it's to have pressure points marked on our face. It's actually more often something that's going to be really relaxing for us. And you each get 3 minutes of that, which is the other beautiful thing about this game is that it's contained in those 3 minutes. So it doesn't feel like, oh, I've got to do this like hour-long massage for my partner. No, it's 3 minutes. But those 3 minutes are so like, it's just so juicy. Like it goes by fast, but it's really nice. Then in the second round, there's 2 rounds of asking, what do you want to do to me for the next 3 minutes? So we had, what do you want to receive from me for the next 3 minutes? And now it's, what do you want to do to me for the next 3 minutes? And this is where it can get a little bit creative, a little bit spicy potentially, because it's asking the other person how they want to interact with your body in a way that will bring them pleasure. So a great example is, I want to fondle your boobies for 3 minutes, or I want to like tease your cock for 3 minutes, or whatever. But again, it doesn't have to be sexual. And the beautiful thing is that you get to decide what you want to do to their body. So there are days where I was pregnant and not feeling sexual at all. And so when Andrew asked, what do you want to do to me for 3 minutes? You know, I don't want to suck your cock because I'm going to gag on it and I'm going to throw up. I would love to, but I do have the capacity to give you a scalp massage. Like I can just lean back, he can have his head in my lap, and I can just really slowly, you know, play with his hair and his scalp. Feels great for him. He loves it, and it's taking out much less energy for me. So, and obviously between each round you can negotiate. So if he made a request that I wasn't feeling aligned with, I can say, you know what, I'm not really feeling that today. How about this? Or is there something else that you would like? So you get to negotiate. I love this game. Again, it takes only like 15 minutes. And I find that on the other side, you feel more connected to your partner and you individually also just feel more nourished. This is a great game to play as foreplay, but it's also just like a nice standalone. And I would say maybe like a third of the time it ends in more sexual connection with Andrew and I, and maybe 2/3 of the time we just like go on with our night. But we feel more connected and we feel like we dropped in together. And we feel like we got to put our bodies together, sometimes naked, sometimes not. And we're doing this right now 3 times a week. So we're doing this on Sundays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays, and it's in our calendar. Yes. So that's how sex and intimacy has changed. We're probably having less penetrative sex, but we're actually having way more connective, intentional intimacy. And also I will say that, Andrew and I are both like big fans of self-pleasure, and I'm still self-pleasuring just as much as I did before pregnancy. I'm self-pleasuring at least once a week, if not twice a week. So there's also that. Okay, we're already an hour in and I still have like several really juicy topics, but it's all good. You guys haven't heard from me in months, so I'm going to keep rocking with the authenticity and the long-winded responses. How are you sorting through all of the options about how to birth? I'm not. I'm not sorting through all the options because I'm going into it very clear how I want to give birth. I don't know when I decided this exactly, but I have known for years that I was just going to have a home birth. I think that it happened around, like, I feel like in my early 20s, I had a lot of undiagnosed, unexplained health issues. And I found that going to Western medical institutions made them worse. And so I started to become really disillusioned with the Western medical system. Not to say that the Western medical system doesn't have a place, but it didn't actually heal me on a deep level. So I was very skeptical of the Western medical industrial complex. And so I just knew I want a home birth if at all possible. And additionally, 4 years ago, which again was the year that I met Andrew, I went through this big initiation around birth, death, and sex. And a lot of things shifted for me that year. I will also say that I was terrified of birth for my whole life. Like, I saw the media portrayals in the movies and on TV of women screaming and emergencies happening, and like I had heard from, like other women in my life, and it just never sounded good. I was like, and I'm very pain averse too. So I just was like, yeah, I was really terrified of birth. So there was a lot of healing that I got to do around what birth actually is, and the mental perspective that I wanted to take on birth, because I also knew, like, how can this not be sacred, beautiful, spiritual, a medicinal experience, in a similar way that people told me that sex was bad and wrong and should only be done in these certain ways and we shouldn't talk about it and it's naughty to be sexy and slutty or whatever. And I was like, I don't fully buy this. It was similar for me around birth, but I was very afraid of the pain, especially. So I made it my mission to do this deep dive on birth, the different ways of birthing. And to me as well, like that year, 2022, I again, as I mentioned, I had this big awareness that birth, sex, and death are the biggest portals that you can go through as a human in and out of this spiritual, like this portal that we have between the spiritual world and the physical world. Birth, death, and sex are the gateways, right? And so to me, birth, death, and sex are like the holy trinity. So I had already deeply explored sex. So that year I went on a deep dive exploring more of birth and death. And that involved doing a doula training. And a doula, for those that aren't aware, is someone who's kind of her role is to support the birthing person or the mother in the birth process. So emotionally, physically, spiritually, she's not trained medically. It's more of the emotional, like, support, physically being comfortable during birth, managing pain, etc. So I actually ended up doing a training for that, which was incredible and really helped me begin to see the different alternatives and it also really brought to light, like, every intervention that I was deeply afraid of had some type of, pretty much, I don't want to say every, but nearly all of the medical interventions that I was afraid of experiencing, almost all of them have a more holistic approach. When you go the more midwife route or the more home birth route. And that really put me at peace and ease to even double down more of, yeah, I'm having a home birth for sure. So Andrew, when we first got together, I told him, he was like, I'm ready to have kids. And I was like, cool, maybe in 3 years. And also I want to have a home birth. And he was like, of course you want to have a home birth. And was kind of like, yeah, like, I freaking love you. But also, like, are you really going to be that crazy bitch that's not going to go to the hospital? Yes, I am. And I ended up having him watch The Business of Being Born, which is a really incredible documentary that illuminates basically what I've been talking about how we have medicalized birth in a really unnecessary way, how we've made birth out to be this emergency situation, and how much the hospital is profiting off of birth in a kind of unfair way. So highly recommend that movie as well, The Business of Being Born. We watched that and he was like, yeah, let's do a home birth. Like, it didn't take anything more than that. And I was like, cool, sweet. So we hired a midwife. She is awesome. She has been birthing babies since the 80s. She was one of the women in Texas who worked with the Western medical system so that home birth and midwifery could become more recognized and safer. And yeah, she's incredible. She has birthed 2 of my friends' babies. So I'm very excited to be working with her. I trust her fully. She also supported me really deeply with my miscarriage because we hired her. No. Sorry, my doggy's barking. No, girl. We hired her during my first pregnancy at the very beginning because she books up super far out in advance because she's so incredible. And so she really supported me so deeply in my miscarriage process. It was really frustrating because I also was trying to work with my gyno through my miscarriage process. And it was like, they were so unhelpful. And obviously they're only available from like 8 to 5. And I was like miscarrying in the evening. And my midwife was basically on call with me and so supportive through that process. So she's great. As far as my feelings around birth and how I'm preparing in that way, yeah, again, I went from being very terrified of birth to now feeling like really excited to go through that initiation. I'm feeling very curious. I definitely still have some nerves, some like, like curiosity / worry about how I'm going to handle in the intensity that comes with birth, but I'm mostly very excited about it. My main goal is just to be present. That's really what I want. I really want to be present. I would really love to birth at home. Obviously, if I need to go to the hospital or if there's something medically going on that does require a more emergency approach, absolutely I'm going to do that. But my dream is to have as little intervention as possible. And my top dream is to have an orgasmic birth. So we'll see. I don't want to speak too much to having an orgasmic birth until I actually maybe have one. But that's kind of what I'm preparing for. I'm doing a orgasmic hypnosis course this month, or like a weekend immersion. And the instructor has actually been on the podcast before. His name is, I can't remember his name right now. I'll come back to it at some point, but I'm doing a training with him, and he has actually worked with women before on having an orgasmic birth using hypnosis. So my intention is to do this workshop at the end of the month and to see kind of how it goes. And if I really like it, I might work with him some more on specifically coaching me one-on-one on orgasmic birth. Those are kind of my next steps there. So yeah, I'm doing the things to prep for that. I have quite a bit of time still. But at the end of the day, what's most important to me is that I come out alive, my baby comes out alive, and we're both healthy and we recover well. So that's the plan. Trusting God to and the baby really to decide the right journey into this world. So, one more thing that I'm doing to prepare as well that I haven't spoke to. Tearing is a big deal with birth. You can tear the tissue in between your vaginal opening and your perineum. And just generally, if the pelvic floor is really tight, it can be harder for the baby to come out, and it can just cause more complications. So I am doing work on my pelvic floor, on opening, relaxing those muscles. And I'm also doing some de-armoring work. So again, I've already mentioned this before. I have a podcast about de-armoring, yoni de-armoring, but I talk about it for different reasons. On that podcast episode, I talk about it more for like trauma healing. Yoni de-armoring is kind of like a deep tissue massage for the pussy, the sexual body, spiritually, emotionally. I'm doing it more specifically to relax, to soften, and to begin to stretch my pelvic floor to make an easier, landing slide for the baby. I've just been doing this myself. Every time I get in the shower, or the bath, I have a pleasure wand. And y'all know, if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, I work with wands, which is spelled WAANDS. They have all kinds of crystal yoni products, pleasure wands, yoni eggs. They're great. And previously, I really was mostly using these products for pleasure, but now I'm using these products to actually prepare my body for birth. And how I'm doing this is I'm inserting the pleasure wands into my pussy and really intentionally relaxing into that. And then I'm massaging internally my vaginal canal, and I'm specifically kind of pushing down, like kind of like backwards towards my perineum, towards my ass, and kind of like pushing down and pulling out to really kind of stretch around the perineal area. So I'm doing that like almost every time I shower. And I started doing that at about like 10 weeks, which is very early, but I just wanted to get in the habit of doing it. And then as I get closer to birth, I'm also going to have my husband do perineal massage as well. And then I will also likely work with a pelvic floor therapist just to check everything out, get the assessment. I'm going to talk to my midwife about that and see what she recommends at our next midwife appointment. So those are some of the things that I'm doing right now in early second trimester. Once baby is here, does anything change for you guys around how sexuality is expressed? We'll know once we're in it, like it's one of those things that we can't really know until we're on the other side of baby, once I'm in postpartum. Obviously, there's going to be a recovery period for me physically to begin to explore sexuality more freely. But we definitely intend to continue to prioritize intimacy in the similar ways that I already talked about that we're doing in pregnancy. So that's definitely going to be a thing. We're definitely planning to still prioritize our sex life despite the baby. To me, if we're well nourished in our relationship, sexually and in all the other ways, we're going to be better parents. So I'm not sure what that's going to look like. It might look like having help to support so we can have date nights, etc. But we'll see as we get closer how we want to plan for that. And obviously, once we're on the other side, there will need to be adjustments. But I am actually very excited to explore my postpartum body. I am feeling a little bit nervous about bouncing back and just feeling comfortable with extra skin, extra weight, all of that stuff. But another thing that we'll see what happens when we get there. But the beautiful thing is that I have had the benefit of witnessing dozens of other women in my world go through this initiation of motherhood, many, many clients and also friends. And what I have seen time and time again is that when you embrace your sexuality and your pleasure and your sensuality postpartum, your recovery is much easier, much faster. Your dynamic with your partner is much better. And in many ways, your sex life can actually get better, but it does take really prioritizing and getting curious. I've had clients that, never squirted before they had a baby, and then suddenly something unlocks for them after they give birth and they're squirting machines. I've had women, join Pleasure Priestess, my program for women, during postpartum, and say that it should be required for all women in postpartum. So I feel really equipped for this. We also had a woman at one of our retreats who she had like a 2 or 3 year old, and they came to the retreat because their intimacy was lacking. And what ended up happening after the retreat is she said, I'm having the best sex of my life. I'm having the best orgasms of my life. So I feel like I'm really set up for this particular initiation. So another question that you guys asked, several people asked this, was around our relationship structure. How will Andrew and I's relationship structure change with the baby and after the baby? So I have several podcast episodes where I talk about, different relating structures, from open relating, polyamory, to monogamy, to monogamish, everything in the middle. And generally, Andrew and I have been more in the monogamish range, meaning we really prioritize our connection, our relationship, and occasionally we invite in external partners and energies to different degrees depending on what's working in our relationship. I would say over the past year and a half, we have been more on the monogamous end of the spectrum, just because of all of the big things that have happened in our lives with our marriage, and health-wise, and creating a baby. It just feels more of like a tighter structure has felt better for us. And we've gone to some play spaces and sensual temples and been in the energy, occasionally interacted with people, but we have actually been mostly monogamous, or more on that monogamous end of monogamish. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We went to a play party recently in Scotland, and I actually shared about this experience. This is our second year going to this play party in Scotland. I actually did a little Tantra workshop for this high-end play party group. I talked about it last year after we went. Last year, meaning at the end of 2024, we had an incredible time. It was so fun. Oh my God. Like, we really played with the group. It was incredible. This time we went and we were like, almost didn't even go to the main play party event. So I think that kind of speaks to where we are in this season. We didn't end up going, but we really just like walked around and watched and witnessed, and then we went home. We were like in bed by like 10:30. So yeah, we're just in a different season right now. Like, our original agreement going into relating with each other was that we were going to have a dynamic where in each season of life, we would be honest with each other about where we were at and what structure would support, again, our expansion and liberation. And we were open to that changing and evolving. But at the end of the day, our relationship comes first, and that's going to continue indefinitely. So yeah, that's what I have on that. Okay, we're down to the last topic. So let's see if we can wrap it up, because we are almost at almost at an hour and a half. What are you doing different in business What are you doing different in business to support pregnancy and birth? So again, this has been a multi-year process. When Andrew and I first got together almost 4 years ago, I had a wake-up call that the life and the business that I had created would not support the marriage and the family that I wanted to create. So around that time, I started to rebuild my business in a way that would be more supportive. When Andrew and I got together, I was traveling like multiple times a month to do one-on-one tantric bodywork sessions in Texas, in California, in New York, in Mexico, like all over. And I wanted to be at home more with him. And I was also doing a ton of events. And I was also doing a lot of one-on-one coaching. And then I had our retreats as well. Over time, I shifted everything. And the first step of this was actually to hire a coach that was a new mom, so I could get kind of her read on what was working in my business, what wasn't, and what was most important to shift, and how to plan my life around pregnancy and birth. And then I really just started creating more scalable and passive offers. I did a lot of things, trial and error, and then just doubled down on what really worked. A huge shift happened for me when I hired an OBM, which is an online business manager. I'd already had a couple of team members at that point, but hiring an OBM to manage my team and also to manage me was really life-changing. To have someone there to catch the things that would normally slip through the cracks, life-changing. So hired an OBM. Last year, I trimmed the tree a lot. So last year was the year that I decided we're going to start trying. So I just began releasing and handing off the things that were no longer in alignment, or I just wasn't going to have the time or capacity for. That included launching no more new programs. So I didn't create anything brand new last year. I started limiting travel for events. So I ended up once I got pregnant, I was like, great, I'm not going to travel. I'm not going to put anything more on my calendar. But then I miscarried. And then I ended up deciding to go to LA and New York. I had some work opportunities, and I also just wanted to do events there. And then I ended up going to LA again for another work opportunity that just kind of fell in my lap. So I ended up traveling quite a bit for work last year, but this year I'm not traveling much at all for events. I am going to New York in March for someone else's event that they're hiring me to teach at. So I don't have to do any of the marketing or the selling. I just show up, do my magic. And Andrew and I were going to go to New York anyways to go see a play. So it just worked out. But I'm not intentionally creating any opportunities for travel. If it's like a insane opportunity, I'll do it, but that's majorly limited. I handed off my play party community, Naked Soul Society, to Dennis, who I had on the podcast last fall. Great episode with him if you're curious. Really, the only new thing I'm doing this year is making a baby. That's it. Nothing new. I'm not making anything happen this year except for have a baby, and everything else is just bonus. I even, to be completely honest, when I was in first trimester, I even started to think about cutting even more stuff out. And I really talked to God about it because for example, Pleasure Priestess, I love this program and I really intentionally created it in a way that was going to be sustainable for motherhood. But I was like, I could just not launch it this year and then wait a year and have the baby and see and then relaunch it. But I talked to God about it, and God was like, no, you're doing this. And I was like, okay. We're Pleasure Priestess is happening again. And there's already some really beautiful women enrolled for the spring cohort, which I'm really excited about. So Pleasure Priestess is happening. Honestly, I've been just taking Pleasure Priestess one cohort at a time since its inception. And at this point, I'm like, I think it's just a thing. I keep being like, this might be the last one. I don't know. And then it's just such a potent offer that I think that the universe is like, yeah, you're doing this. So that's happening. We have our retreats, the Tantra Love Retreat. And then other than that, I'm doing some one-on-one coaching. So pretty bare bones as far as offers go, but these are the most potent, powerful, fun offers that I have. So that feels really good. I also just want to share that as far as one-on-one coaching goes, I do have space for some one-on-one coaching this spring, but I will be kind of leaning back from those pieces over the summer. Our due date is in July, which is perfect. I kind of planned everything really well around the trimesters. So during my first trimester, right when I found out I was pregnant, I had just finished a Pleasure Priestess launch. I just came back from my work trip in LA, and I was really planning on just chilling over the holidays anyways. That's what I typically do. I paused the podcast over the holidays. So I was really in a great place during my first trimester. All I had was Pleasure Priestess, and I love that space. It's so nourishing. There's lots of mamas in there, so they get it. And yeah, so that's all I've had. And then now that I'm coming into second trimester, things are going to start to ramp up. I'm now going into marketing the next round of Pleasure Priestess, and I have the retreat in April. I've got that work trip in March. And then in May, things will start to taper off again for the summer, and I'll have the baby, and then we'll see, kind of reassess what the fall is going to look like. But I should be able to have my first 40 days completely off work, chilling, relaxing. So I definitely recommend aligning your business with your trimesters, because for me, the first trimester it felt really good that I could just not worry about business and totally just worry about what my body was doing and taking care of myself and resting as much as I needed to. So I'm really, really grateful for that. But as I mentioned, I do have some space for one-on-one coaching now. So like 3-month packages are really what I'm going for if you're wanting that, or 3 months now, we take a break over the summer and then we start back up in the fall. And what I really am wanting to do more of is business coaching. So as I'm talking about like how I'm shifting my business for motherhood, I feel like I've done it really well. And I also really love business coaching. To me, it's such an extension of my Tantra work, because stepping into your purpose and your passion is one of the most potent things that you can do for your own personal transformation, but also for the world. Like, it's incredible. So I love guiding other people into that portal. So if you're interested in that, please don't hesitate to reach out. I do one-on-one coaching. I also have a course called Business and Pleasure, which is a strategy meets energetics path to go to 6 figures and beyond. It's a really great program. I can with pride say that within a couple of years of running my business, I was at 6 figures, and I've had figure years for the past. This will be my 4th year having a multi-6-figure year. And even in the year that I'm having a baby, I know with certainty that I'm having a multi-6-figure year, which is pretty insane since it's only January. But January ended up being a really great month for me. And just looking at what else is on the cards, it's going to be another multi-6-figure year. So that's really cool that I'm working right now, like 5 or 10 hours a week. I just took 3 months mostly off. And then I'm going to be taking off a bunch of time in the summer to have this baby, and I'm still at that place. It feels really good. So if that sounds good to you and you want to create that for yourself and your family, please say hey, and let's make it happen. Another thing that I'm doing is I have kind of mentored some women in my world. They have deeply invested in this space, and so they're being rewarded by giving more responsibility. And I'm going to be paying them to take on some of my business while I'm on maternity leave. And I also have one of my friends who is my new OBM who is also going to be supporting me. And I've worked with her. We've hosted retreats together. She's already like an amazing coach in her own right, but she's just kind of shifted to the more strategic and logistical side over the past couple of years and supporting other businesses. And so she's going to be taking on more of that in my business too. That's everything. Those are all of the updates. That's the life update. That's the pregnancy, the birth plan, all the things. I think I could have kept going and gone even deeper on some of these topics, but I know that this is maybe my longest episode yet. So thanks for sticking with me. Sending you so much love. Have a sacred and sexy day, and we'll catch you next time for the Conscious Kink and Polarity episode. If you are enjoying the podcast, it would mean so much if you could leave a review. Your reviews help the podcast thrive. It helps the podcast become more relevant in the search results, which means that more people are able to find this world and this work and benefit from it. So thank you so much for leaving a review, and catch you next time. Ta-ta. I can't believe I'm doing this, but here we go. Full heart, full permission, and full womb. I am entering my mother season. And as I slow down to prepare for this next chapter of life, I feel more lit up than ever about empowering you, especially when it comes to business and money, because the world my baby is being born into, I want it dripping with purpose, pleasure, and power in the right hands, your hands. So for a limited time, I'm offering 50% off my business and pleasure course. This is a self-paced path to building a business to 6 figures and beyond that feels as good as it looks. We're talking strategies, systems, and sacred energetics for the turned on leader who refuses to choose between impact and income or between hustle and joy. This course is for the soul who wants to scale from some softness and sensuality and build something real and sustainable. You'll learn the systems that let you grow while living your life, the energetics of magnetism, visibility, and money, how to sell with soul and build offers from deep alignment, because pleasure and purpose are not mutually exclusive. And when people like us, the listeners of this podcast, when you rise, the world changes. So use code PODCAST to get 50% off. Yes, 50% off only for a short time, because I truly want this in as many hands as possible before I go into full-on goddess mama mode. And P.S., I highly recommend upgrading to the first class VIP tier to receive one-to-one support with me while you build, because it's going to be intimate, potent, and deeply activating. And with this code for 50% off, it's actually less than my typical one-to-one mentorship. Plus, you're going to get this whole course as well. So there just has never been a better deal. Go to the link in my show notes to sign up for Business and Pleasure. Use the code podcast for 50% off for a limited time.